We're going to be diving into everything around that pre-game meal, what really sets the foundation for the game at hand. So, we're going to talk about the timing, what the makeup of that meal should be, and things to look for as well as to avoid. So, the full breakdown, that last meal before the game, what it is, and what we need to be focusing on. So, it's important to understand the context and why we need to make sure that we're emphasizing and prioritizing that meal because during a game, most second half fades. So that 80th minute plus, when all of a sudden the fatigue really starts to set in, that usually isn't a fitness problem that arises. 100% it could be, but 9 times out of 10, as an athlete, you're out there, you trained hard for it, your body's ready. It's a fuel challenge. That's really where the issue arises. The body and the muscles are ready and able to do it, but they don't have the gas in the tank to be able to do that. We need to make sure that we've got enough fuel in the body to be able to last that full 90 minutes. Think about what you're eating is adding fuel to the car, adding fuel to your engine. If you go out there to play a game with a half a tank, you're not going to be able to go as far as you would if you had a full tank. Going into this game, you have a full tank, ready full of energy to be able to go and put forth a full 90 minutes, not just to survive the 90 minutes, but to put forth a solid effort, to be able to, from the first whistle to the last whistle, give your 110% and perform at the level that you know you can. Decrease how quickly those heavy legs and that heavy breathing and fatigue really kick in. 100% that fatigue is going to kick in. When you give your all, you're gonna start to feel tired. But we want to make sure that we put as much as possible before we get to that point. And so when it comes to that pre-game meal, the timing that we want to be mindful of is we want to give this 3 to 4 hours in advance. We want to get it in 3 to 4 hours in advance. And the reason for that is because kind of threefold. We want to make sure that we give the body time to digest the food. We want to make sure that the food then gets to the muscles to be able to have those carbohydrates, the glycogen stored. And we want to give the body time to settle the stomach. These are the three big things that none of this happens immediately, which is why we want to ensure we give the body plenty of time to be able to do that. So, from a digestion standpoint, we want to allow the body, after we consume it, to process everything appropriately. If we consume that too close to exercise, when we start training, the body shifts its focus away from the stomach to the muscles because that's what we're asking it to do. We're asking it to perform. So before the body shifts its focus, we want to make sure that it's done with the stomach. And so that's where we want to give it the time to digest everything appropriately. Then, once it is digested, we need to make sure the body's got time to put that food where it needs to go, to put that energy where it needs to go. 3 to 4 hours is absolutely sufficient to be able to do that. And then, the last but not least, is just to allow the stomach to settle. After you eat, yeah, it can be, depending on how much you eat and things like that, for some of us, a little uncomfortable, especially if we go immediately from eating to playing. We want to give the body time to allow the stomach to settle because nobody likes to go out there with that cinder block feeling in their stomach. So, what does this plate look like? We want to ensure that we're prioritizing and emphasizing the appropriate things when we put that plate together. The main focus when it comes to this meal is going to be carbohydrates. The reason for that is because carbs are your primary fuel source when you're going out there performing at a high intense level. We want to make sure that we're getting that rice, pasta, some oats, bread, whatever carbohydrate source is the most appealing to you in. And we want that to be taking up roughly half of your plate. Now, depending on your body size, some individuals need more, some may need less. But the concept is we want to be consuming extra carbohydrates. That's the focal point of it. So even in the photo here, this was the nicest looking photo of some pasta and chicken and veggies and things that I could find, but the portions aren't necessarily 100% accurate here. So I would increase that pasta a little bit, decrease some of those veggies a little bit there, but the protein's looking solid. I would also sprinkle in a little bit of fruit, add either a sports drink or some fruit juice to kind of go along with that to get a little extra carbs, or just make sure that we're getting some hydration in there. But coming back to the plate as a whole, half that plate carbohydrates, that's the focus. Quarter of the plate, lean protein. We still want to get that protein in because that protein is going to, big picture, still just help make sure that we're hitting our total protein needs for the entire day. to make sure our body has what it needs to be able to build muscle, repair muscle, and keep everything going there. It's also going to be very satiating. It's going to provide some fullness to make sure that we're not stepping onto that field, having our stomach rumbling. So we want to keep that as a lean protein option, such as chicken or turkey or a fish option, because what we want to do is keep the fat a little bit lower. This ties in with the vegetable concept, where fat and fiber, the two F's, we want to keep that relatively low in this meal because those two things take longer for the body to digest, and everything that we are trying to avoid by eating 3 to 4 hours early, the upset stomach, give the body time to digest and process everything. Fat and fiber slow that process down. So a little bit, perfectly okay. Don't worry about it too much, but we want to make sure that that's not a focal point. And going with a chicken, turkey, or fish option as opposed to, say, like a higher fat beef option is why that's 9 times out of 10 going to sit best. And then for that last quarter of a plate, get some low fiber veggies, some fruit in there. And so when I say low fiber veggies, roasted is usually going to be the best bet. That cooking process breaks things down a little bit easier, and so most of us are able to tolerate it better. But if looking for kind of like a specific recommendation, carrots tend to be the hot tip, the hot item that most of the teams that I work with, that's always going to be on the menu. Super safe bet, 3 to 4 hours in advance. We got some pasta, potatoes, chicken, carrots. Bingo. Love it. Another hot one is actually broccoli, roasted broccoli. It's super common, so everybody is familiar with it. They know how their body's going to respond to it. It is a little bit higher in fiber. It is a cruciferous vegetable, but a lot of individuals sit well with it and they like that concept because they're familiar with it. Green beans can be another one to incorporate there, but big picture, carbs are the focus. Get some lean protein and a quarter of the plate then to wrap that up, a little bit of low fiber vegetables and or some fruit. Now, when it comes to the carbohydrate piece, not all carbs are created equal. The body's going to break them down and digest them at different rates. For this pre-game meal, 3 to 4 hours out, I recommend focusing on slow carbs. This definition is going to mean something different to everybody that you talk to. So the context and what I am referring to when I say slow carbohydrates here are whole food carbohydrates. I am talking bread, pasta, potatoes, oats, those types of things. But what I want us to focus on here are those whole food carbohydrate options to be able to get those carbs in, and it's going to digest a little bit slower. What I'm not recommending, and when I say fast carbohydrates, are like those sports supplements. So the goos, the gels, those chews, high sugar type items. Not recommending those because what happens if we consume just pure carbohydrates, and in particular, there's nothing but carbohydrates coming, especially from those sports products. The goos, the gels, the chews, all of those things, that's going to cause the glucose in the body to spike really, really quickly. When that occurs, the body tries to bring that glucose down quickly, which is going to cause a crash. Think of a kid in a Halloween. They get the bag of candy, go through the whole bag in one night, bouncing off the walls. And then all of a sudden, flip of a switch, they crash. They're on the floor, passed out type of a thing. That's what we want to avoid in your body. So we want to prioritize those whole food carbohydrate pieces. Avoid some of those fast carbohydrate type items, those sports products. Save those for later. They do have a place. By focusing on that, we're able to help keep the glucose level steady throughout to ensure that we don't get that crash, and it's going to help make sure that most of that glucose is still ready. Most of those carbohydrates are still being stored appropriately to get us through the full 90 minutes. So what do those slow carbs look like? Again, I rattled off a few of these, but oatmeal, rice, bread, pasta, sweet potatoes, some berries, grapes, those types of things. These are all going to be great carbohydrate sources to get in that pregame meal 3 to 4 hours in advance. The things that we want to keep light and minimize the intake of, this is going to tie into that higher fat, higher fiber content aspect of things. Most of this probably isn't going to be a surprise, but especially this first one. Fast food and fried food, we want to limit that as much as possible, especially across the board, not just the pre-match meal, but the more we limit fast food, the more we limit fried food especially, the better our body's going to be. Those foods are absolutely going to be tougher on our stomach to both digest, process, and just to ensure that it sits well. It really increases the risk of us having an upset stomach when we step on the field. The heavy cream sauces are going to fall into the similar category. So if thinking of like an Olive Garden, The pasta's great, but if we throw a lot of Alfredo sauce on top of that, the fat content of the heavy cream that goes into the Alfredo can really slow you down in the game because it's slowing your digestion down. That food could still be sitting in the stomach, causing some discomfort and slowing the release of that carbohydrate and that glucose into the muscles appropriately. The other things that we want to be mindful of are those high fiber foods. So, big salads, seeds, beans. These are great items from a nutrition standpoint as a whole, but not in this moment. The 3 to 4 hours out, we want to keep those relatively low. And the reason is that fiber piece. It takes the body longer to process and digest it. So it's going to sit in the stomach longer, increasing the chances of discomfort. The other thing is anything new. No new foods on game day. If you don't know how your body's going to respond to it, this is not the time to risk that. So stick with familiar foods, keep that fat and fiber content down. Then, after we get through that pre-game meal, we're going to dive into that snack 60 to 90 minutes beforehand. This is to really top off that fuel tank. We set the foundation with the meal. Now we want to make sure that we have something to bridge that gap, to get that glucose back up a little bit. And these are where we start to shift a little bit more to some of those more faster carbs, to some of those more kind of simpler carbs. Some items and examples of that are going to be bananas, pretzels, toast with jelly, granola bar, a little bit of juice. All of these things should be familiar to you. Again, the closer that we get to the game, it's even more apparent, but this is not the time to be trying new things. If you've never had it before, don't do it. We can practice some of those things during training when we have the opportunity to be able to expose the body in a less risk, less important environment. Keep these things basic. Keep these things you're familiar with. Keep them carbohydrate focused to be able to get that glucose in, get that energy in to bridge that gap between the pregame meal and that first whistle. When it comes to hydration, your hydration is actually going to have started yesterday. We don't want you to rely purely and solely on what you're consuming the day of. We need to set that foundation the day before because if we wake up dehydrated, you can't just chug a bottle of water and magically get hydrated. It takes the body time to be able to actually absorb that, retain that fluid, and truly get back into a hydrated state. So the day before, we want to make sure that we have a water bottle on hand consistently. We're sipping on it consistently. We want to be sipping on it enough that when we go to the bathroom, our urine is a pale lemonade color. This is going to be the easiest way to be able to understand how hydrated we are. In the morning, pale lemonade color. If it's a dark apple juice type color, we've got some work to do. We need to play catch up. But if we're checking this the day before, we've got time to do that. If we wait until the morning of and we notice that dark color, we've got trouble because we can't catch up that quickly. So when it comes to the day of then, because we laid the good foundation the night before, with your meal, that 3 to 4 hours out, make sure that you're pairing that with at least kind of 16 to 24 ounces of water. Again, everybody's body's different. Everybody's needs are going to be a little bit different, but this is a good reference point. 16 to 24 ounces with that meal. Then when we get to the snack, that 60 to 90 minutes out, 8 to 12 ounces, 1 to 1.5 cups. So if you've got like a typical 16-ounce water bottle, half to 3/4. If you finish the water bottle, sweet. Big thing, just consistently be sipping on that throughout that time period. And then in the last 30 minutes, small sips only. No chugging, because again, you can't just chug a bottle of water and magically be hydrated. You also don't want to just chug a ton of water beforehand and get that sloshing feeling in the stomach. I feel like we've all been there. We all know that feeling. We don't want that. So especially the last 30 minutes, just be sipping on it consistently. Small sips consistently to be able to keep that hydration status up. So where does this tend to go wrong? These tend to be the most common challenges that the athletes I work with tend to face. A big one being eating too late. If you eat too much too close to the game itself, odds are you're going to feel pretty rough because the body just doesn't have time to digest all of it. The stomach is still working to digest and process that food at the same time that we're now asking it to go and perform. I mentioned it in the beginning, but when that occurs, the body and the mind shift its focus from stomach and digestion to muscles and performance. It's very difficult to do both things simultaneously, and we don't want it to. When we're performing, we want that to be the sole focus. When we're on the field, we want that to be the primary focus. If we eat too late, the body doesn't have time to be able to prioritize the digestion as much. So that food is still sitting there. The other challenge is eating too little, just under consuming. The concept and the thought is, I want to be light when I go out there and play. I get that. 100%. It makes sense. You don't want to feel heavy. That's why you don't eat late, too close to the game. That's why you don't eat, going to the next one, a high fat or high fiber food. You space that out. You give yourself the 3 to 4 hours. You maintain a little bit more of a carbohydrate focus, which gets in and out of the system a lot quicker to be able to feel light when you step on that field. The more that you consume, the closer to the game, the more that's likely still going to be sitting in the stomach, contributing to that. So keep the fat and fiber down, carb focused, 3 to 4 hours out. The other challenge, and where it sometimes gets a little tripped up and goes wrong, is skipping that pregame snack. It's been 3 to 4 hours since you ate that you're about to play. That's a decent amount of time. You're going to want to eat something. So having that pregame snack is going to be able to not only just provide a little bit of satiety and fullness in that moment, it's going to top off the energy stores. It is a key piece that we want to make sure that we don't just gloss over, that we don't take for granted and simply ignore. Get that pregame snack in. Another challenge is trying something new on game day. So depending on where you go, depending on the environment, if you're in a new city or anything like that, you're like, man, I've never been here before. This is something that I typically don't get in my hometown or wherever. I'm going to try it. Not a good idea. Don't do that. If you try something new, you have no idea how your body's going to respond. If you've never had sushi before and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, this seems like a good idea and a good time to try it, it's not. Don't do that. Save that for when it's away from a match. Focus on those familiar foods. And the last one is drinking too much water in the last hour. This tends to be individuals who didn't hydrate well the day before. All of a sudden they go to the bathroom before the match and they're like, oh shoot, like this is apple juice color, this is dark, I know I'm dehydrated, I need to just chug a ton and I'll be fine. That backfires. Because while yes, you do want to try to get that hydration up, it's too late. Now, I don't mean that from the standpoint of you should be in a mental state now where you're like, well, I'm screwed. Not necessarily, but we definitely want to make note for the future. You did not set yourself up for an optimal game. Your body could have been performing better. There's no denying that. But we just want to make sure that we're not chugging too much too late because again, the body can't absorb all of that quickly. That's why we need to be sipping consistently early on. If we chug too much too late, it's just going to sit in the stomach. We're going to get that sloshing feeling and it's really not going to feel good. So that pregame timeline, 3 to 4 hours out, we want to make sure we get that full meal, half a plate of carbs, lean protein, fruit, low fiber veggies, and 16 to 24 ounces of water. Then 60 to 90 minutes out, we get that small snack, carb focused, a little bit of fluid in there as well to top everything off. Then that last 30 minutes, small sips of water, perhaps a sports drink, but absolutely nothing new. If there's a new energy bar or a new performance food type thing on the bench or in the sideline, not the time to try it. Save that for training. And then during the warm-ups themselves, just get the body moving. Muscles activated, get everything all locked in, mentally focused, and your fuel's ready. Then once that whistle goes, everything's topped off and do what you do best. Now, here are some of the common questions that tend to pop up on this topic whenever I'm working with athletes and or their parents. What if my athlete won't eat 3 to 4 hours before a game? This is a very common one, and it tends to arise from the fact that there's some nerves to where when we are nervous, the appetite tends to go away, which is understandable. It's unfortunate because in this time period and situation, we absolutely want to be eating. So if that occurs, start small. Don't try and force a full meal. Meet them where they're at. Start with a carbohydrate focus item still because we want to make sure that we're getting those carbs in. But this can be a way to really prioritize liquid calories. Liquids are going to be able to get in and out of the stomach a lot quicker than whole foods themselves. So if they're already feeling a little nervous and food's not sitting well and they're kind of nauseous, liquid calories are going to be your friend. Sipping on sports drinks, getting a nice smoothie in there, that can be a great way to be easy on the stomach while still making sure to get something in. But you want to just gradually introduce some different foods and gradually build that stomach to be able to withstand and be able to tolerate a full meal. The stomach is just like the body. We can train it, but it needs to be gradual. Then the next question, What about morning kickoffs? These can always be a tough time period because depending on the time that the game starts, you may not have that 3 to 4 hours beforehand to really get a meal unless you're going to wake up at 4 a.m. It's that balance between waking up to get a meal in and prioritizing sleep. We still want to sleep. But when that time window gets condensed and really shortened, that means that when we're having that meal in breakfast time, we need to be more carbohydrate focused, keep the portions in check and not overdo it too much, stay on top of our hydration, and really stick to familiar foods. This puts a greater emphasis on what we do the day and the night before. That's really where we're going to be getting a lot of the pre-game meal from to set us up for breakfast. Breakfast should just be trying to top things off. So if we lay the foundation, same concepts of what that plate should look like the night before at dinner, and then breakfast tops it off. So shortened time period, keep it carb focused, keep it super familiar foods, keep it basic, keep it tolerable for what your athlete or what you are able to tolerate, and go from there. We want to make sure that we emphasize and prioritize the day before though, because it's going to matter even more, both food wise and hydration wise. And then, why does my athlete feel sluggish after eating before a game? There's a few reasons for this and a few different angles to kind of go about it. And so typically when I hear this, one of the most common things that pops up is the fact that there was either too much fat or too much fiber within that meal. And it's because the body is then taking longer to digest and process it, and all of that slows down. So that food is still sitting in the stomach as we approach game time. And if we're feeling a little nervous, that's going to slow it down even more so, which is going to then cause some of the discomfort, feel sluggish. Another reason could be if we are consuming too little. If we don't consume enough in that meal, the body just straight up doesn't have the energy on hand, which if it doesn't have energy, it's going to feel tired. Then on the reverse of that, if we consume too many pure carbohydrate foods, those fast carbs, this comes back to that glucose spike and then crash thereafter. So there's a lot of different factors that can be at play with all this. And it's really just doing an honest assessment of, okay, what did I do leading up to the game? Is this in line with everything that we just discussed here? And if not, where's the disconnect? What was not followed? What was not executed? What was done differently? And starting to troubleshoot that. And if this is something where it's continuing to be a recurring thing, like reach out to me, like 100%. Want to help make sure that your athlete is feeling good and ready to go. But there's a lot of different things that can be contributing to it. Again, big ones tend to be too much fat or fiber at the meal, not enough food that they're consuming, so they're just feeling gassed, and or too much just kind of pure carbohydrates, those fast carbohydrates, too early, where that crash really comes into play. And so with all that, the big takeaway from everything that we discussed, for that next match that you have coming up, pick one topic, one little nugget of information that we were discussing here, and implement it. You don't need to change everything all at once. You don't need to implement everything all at once. That can be overwhelming. But I do want to challenge you, find that one thing that really kind of jumped out to you and resonated with you and implement that. See how you feel, see how your body responds. And once that becomes a habit and you notice that difference, proceed to the next one. But all these things build upon each other to help at the end of the day. Just make sure you're well fueled and able to go out, do what you do, and perform your best.